Imagine a story of one of the very first volunteer ambulance corps. It started not too far from here along the Hudson River. It was a place with dangerous jobs in construction, on the waterfront, there are ships on the river, there are dangerous roads that were dark. The ambulance corps started years ago with a white-hot passion and a laser-like focus. So why do you start an ambulance corps? It's really simple. You start because people in the community are dying. And that was a fact. They were getting injured on bridges. They were getting hurt on ships. There were car accidents. And the fact was people were dying because they couldn't get medical help until it was too late. And helping those people became the thing of first importance for this ambulance corps. So years ago, it was a long time ago, they started a volunteer ambulance organization. And for decades, they saved countless lives by taking broken, hurt people to medical care. And of course, along the way, you add logistical things. They put up some rough buildings so that volunteers could get there faster. They bought a really nice ambulance, and they got shiny uniforms, but they're focused on saving lives. In fact, sometimes a community would just think, what would we ever do if we didn't have an ambulance corps? But that was a long time ago now. And no one really knows the timeline of when or how things changed, but eventually, over time, people in the ambulance department forgot why they existed. And the mission got a little out of focus, and you could still visit the building today. It's a museum. And you can, if you pay admission, you could walk in and you could look around and you could see where dedicated volunteers once slept when they were on call. You can hear stories about how they used to go and rescue others. And if you walk past the gift shop, right next to the mugs, you can see some older members who are drinking coffee and younger members who are looking at plaques honoring days long past. Of course, everyone's still busy. Like, there's still volunteers, there's things to do. You got to shine the uniforms and polish the old ambulance. And they still get called to go out. But it's for the annual 4th of July parade. That's pretty much it. Because the mission has been lost. There was this one guy who wanted to take the ambulance out and start picking up people in it. But he just got laughed at because everyone realized really quickly how messy that would be. Because hurting people are really messy. And unused ambulances that get really shined up are really clean. And change is hard because they'd have to make some updates to the historical buildings and the vehicles. And there are changes, of course, in technology and practice. And the organization decided it wasn't worth the inconvenience because they're really comfortable. And everybody's really happy. Like, no one was really grumpy. I mean, I guess not everybody, because there was still one tiny problem. The one thing that hadn't changed over the years, is this. People in the town were still injured and still dying because they couldn't get to medical care before it was too late. The tragedy of this is that rather than bringing healing, the ambulance corps over time slowly got distracted. They got involved in 100 other really good things that seemed fun, but they forgot the thing of first importance. They forgot their mission. And they left people with lives unchanged while people everywhere were sick, injured, and dying. And, people smarter than me, I'm not an expert in this, but there are folks who study national trends in churches, say that this parable, as it were, is a tragically fitting description of most traditional churches in the United States. The sad fact is that too many churches start off really well, start really strong back in the day with a crystal clear passion for the mission of the church, but it's changed. It's a sort of thing that's really easy to lose track of because people naturally like to exchange the uncomfortable but valuable work of showing God's amazing glory and love to people. It's so much easier to be comfortable and stable. Like, this is what a lot of churches in the United States do. They act as though their own comfort is the thing of most importance. The tragedy in our country, to be honest, is that God doesn't say you or me being comfortable is the most important thing. Frankly, you could add a lot on a list of things that aren't what God says is most important. The most important thing for churches, actually, don't take my word for it. I'm going to let God answer this one. This is 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and 5. This is what God says. Paul writes, "For what I received, I passed on to you of," see that? First importance. Like, this is the main thing, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. Or maybe it would help to read the verses right before this. So we just read 3 through 5. This is, the sentence is right before, verses 1 and 2. Now, brothers, Paul writes, I want to remind you of the gospel that I preached to you, which you received, in which, see what it says? On which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. And then verse 3, what I read, what I received, first importance, etc. I mean, really, really simply put, the reason why we gather, the thing of first importance, the mission of the church, as it were, is really simple: to remember the gospel, which, simply put by someone smarter than me, well, here's the fact: we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared believe. We are more broken than we know. And at the same time, we are loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. And by the way, just in case, I mean, it sounds like a lofty academic sort of information-driven thing, but let me just tell you, 1 Corinthians is not an academic book. It was written to, I don't know if you know this or not, but it was written to the Corinthians, which were an ancient, notoriously messed up, broken group of people. You can read Corinthians. There's racism, there's immorality, broken marriages, broken relationships, violence, addiction, a lack of ethics, no morals. There was public health crisis. There was wealth inequity. Corinth had dysfunction of every imaginable type. And to a messed up community like that, not, I hate to say it, but not an unfamiliar context for most of us. We've all seen brokenness, right? God says that the thing that broken people really need desperately, the solution to those seemingly unsolvable problems, is the gospel. That's the thing of first importance. And Corinthians later lays out that when people like us see how much Jesus did for us, we start serving Jesus, loving God, and showing God's love to people, to God's glory, in a way that for the early Christian, I'm not exaggerating here, they were accused accurately of turning the entire world upside down because people were rescued. Lives were changed when Christians made the gospel the main thing. And of course, the tragedy in American churches, easily illustrated, is that we've seen over time how easy it is to exchange the thing of first importance for something, or for so many other things that may be good but far less important. But look, that's not why we're here, right? We're not because of any of that. We're here because you, Goshen Church and its community and its brother and sister churches, we have resolved not to let anything distract us or get away from the proclamation of the gospel. And let me just say, I'm really so happy and proud to be part of this group here. Because how crazy was that? I can look at movies from 67 years ago, and I've got in my office a ton of pictures from 85 years ago. And you know what we don't have to say? We need not say, look back at the good old days. when people had fun together. Remember back when people got together and sacrificed? We don't have to say, ooh, look at back then when people got together to build something. I sure wish we could still do that. We don't have to say that. Like we don't have to say, look, way back then you've got, ooh, families getting stronger, community coming together, good times and bad times. Like, we don't have to say, man, I wish we still did that, right? Because we are committed to the mission of the gospel. And I'm so glad to be here because I have a whole box of stuff in my office, but I can read how former pastors led. And I could see and hear what this church did, and I can confidently say that as many things that have changed, as many, I'll be honest, change is hard, it's uncomfortable. I was actually reading really early on when we were a group of immigrants and we had to change. It was sort of controversial. We decided to do something new and have services in English instead of Dutch. Like that was a real discussion we had. We built a school, we built a new sanctuary, we built a youth building, now a new addition. And for each year imagine all the hundreds of organizational and cultural changes that went along with each of those decades. But here's why I'm excited. Despite all the changes over the last 85 years, we have been at our best when we have kept the thing of first importance. The thing of first importance. And look, I'm around a lot. I'm involved with lots of things going on this campus with lots of you. And I'll be real, I'm convinced that God's call has not wavered one bit. You know, what's next for Goshen Church? It always looks different, but the focus needs to stay exactly the same as the folks who founded this church, the same as the early Christians in Corinth, to keep the gospel the main thing, to show off God's gospel and glory to people with the prayer and confidence that God draws people to himself. And God fixes messes and changes lives. You know, if you read the books, one of the really haunting questions that church researchers ask is, if your church closed today, what would the people in your community think? Would they even notice, the question goes. And how church leaders answer that question answers a sort of job that you're doing at loving your neighbors and making an impact where God's placed you. And here's where I'm at. I'll just be real. I want to do everything that I can to help bring about a future where, in being faithful to God's call on us, people in our community, people driving by, if asked, they would answer, I don't know what we would do without Goshen Church. If I didn't know about Jesus, my life would have been overwhelming. Without this church, my kids would have never learned the character, ethics, and faith that this community prioritizes. I was hungry and they fed me. I was thirsty and they gave me a drink. That we can simultaneously see the bad news of messiness, of problems and hurt people, and looking straight at the challenges that face our community. And simultaneously rejoice in the rescue that the good news of Jesus brings. That's where God has always called churches together. And today we celebrate crossing the finish line of completing the building of an addition. But look, folks, this is not a finish line. Let me be clear here. This is the starting gate. This is a springboard. We dedicate these rooms for God's future service. And we celebrate the firm resolve of you, God's people, to show God's love to others in a way that keeps the gospel central and loving others foremost in keeping to God's call to, I am not exaggerating at all, to say that our call is to accomplish nothing short of changing the world.